Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. Nate the Barbarian with you. This is the Hot Mic Podcast. And the Hot Mic Podcast is where divergent points of view debate and discuss hot topics. And boy, we got some super hot topics, super relevant topics for you today. But let me introduce the crew for today. We got Tarris Horton. How
Hey,
you doing, Tarris? How you doing,
doing
sir?
well,
Good
doing
to see
good,
you.
guys.
And Phil Heimlich. How you doing, Phil? Yo, Phil, can you hear us? Uncle Phil. Uncle Phil can't hear us. So I'll just introduce Kevin Aldridge. What's up, Kevin?
What's up? Happy tax day to everybody, or I guess it may not be happy, depending on whether you got a return coming back or you got to pay the government.
I know that's right. I know that's right. And
Hey
people are
man,
still
let me. I'm
still
also
scrambling.
tell, I'm also tell our audience why you my guy, Nathan. Nathan. He come. We had a long conversation in the last pod about these promo photos, and I was telling Nathan. I said, "Hey man, hook me up." And then what does he come with this week? Something that was even worse than last week. And I was like, it's a part of his nefarious, diabolical plan. See, I love that though, because I'm a lot like that. I like to keep picking at the scab. So I mean, I can't wait to see what you're gonna have on Friday.
You know what? I think you're reading too much into it, bro. It was really more simpler than that. I'm just trying to do things really quickly. I grabbed the screen grab but I did hear you. I was like, well, let me switch it up for him. I figured a smile would be better. I didn't put a whole lot more thought in it. And if you look at mine is exactly the same. I ain't particularly all that super thrilled about it. Like I'm not sending that in as a headshot, but it'll work for what we're doing. I'm trying to get Phil on. Phil, can you hear us?
I can. I'm sorry if we had a problem. Can you guys hear me?
I can't hear you. How you doing, man?
For better or for worse, can you hear me?
For better or for worse, it's a good way of caveat because I know you're gonna piss me off in about 5 minutes. I already know.
Hey, come on. Healthy argument, healthy debate. That's what the First Amendment is about. Am I right, Tarris?
Don't bring me into that one.
Come on.
Don't bring me into that mess.
Come on.
That want nothing to do with that. Well, we looks like we're on the last days of our democracy because we have our constitutional crisis that we've been anticipating. It has happened. And it's all about the release, really the arrest, detention, and deportation of a man named Kilmar Armando Abrega Garcia. And he was snatched off the streets of these United States and sent to essentially what people are calling a concentration camp, but it is a prison in El Salvador. Now, the Trump administration admitted that he was mistakenly arrested and mistakenly deported. But this week, Donald Trump doubled down and said, okay. Matter of fact, they had a press conference between himself and the president, who, as I understand it, and someone may have a better handle on this, he is an authoritarian himself. Bukele is his name, of Venezuela. And I've got a clip for you I want to share with you before we get into this. It may give people who missed it a little bit more backstory on it. Let me see here. Oh, here it is. For my friends over at the Midas Touch Network, if you're not following them, you should be. They are worth your time. Check this out.
Did Trump cut her off before attacking her credibility? Because, of course.
President Bukele to help return the man who your administration says was mistakenly deported. The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs. If they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it.
So understand that is the U.S. Attorney General in the White House speaking about a man who was never charged with any crimes, who was snatched by law enforcement, deported to a very, very bad place by all accounts. And now she's saying that there's nothing that we can do about it. Check this out.
Meaning provide a plane.
So will you return
And
President?
you are doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait a minute. Can you just also respond to that question? Because, it's asked by CNN and they always ask it with a slant because they're totally slanted because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But would you answer that question also, please?
Yes.
Well, Mr. President, you said that if the Supreme Court said someone needed to be returned, that you would abide by that. You said that on Air Force One just a few days ago.
But if the Supreme Court said bring somebody back, I would do that. I respect the Supreme Court.
And the lower court judge as well. He's been asking for
I'm not talking about the lower court. I have great respect for the Supreme Court. So I'm not totally well versed as to the specific case, but if they said to bring him back, I would tell them to bring him back.
And they said that it must be facilitated.
Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that?
Why can't you just say that, Caitlin Collins from CNN? Why can't you just be grateful that we're snatching citizens or just snatching individuals with no due process, sending them to the concentration camps with a lot of very bad people, and then saying we're not bringing them back? So I want to get your thoughts on what's happening right now. Everyone jump in there. Don't be shy because we only got a couple of days left of democracy. So you might as well speak your mind now.
I think that one of the things people should recognize is that it's very possible there could be many of those migrants that were sent to El Salvador they could very well, many of them be innocent people because none of them got a hearing. None of them got due process. The only reason we know about this guy is because the attorney for the Justice Department admitted in court that it was a mistake. And by the way, that attorney has since been put on administrative leave. In other words, for speaking the truth. And, there's a lot of what I'd call reaping and sowing, to use a biblical expression, going on here. And I'm talking about people who voted for Trump, supported Trump, and nobody should be surprised, and nobody should say, oh, he hasn't kept his promises, because to his credit, he has kept his promises. He's made it clear this is what he was going to do. Speaking of reaping and sowing, I'd also point the finger at the Supreme Court, who gave him carte blanche to break the law. And interesting enough, in the brief that the government has filed opposing the demand that this guy be brought back, they cite that case. I think it's called Trump versus U.S. They cite that case as evidence that he can do whatever he wants. So these guys in the Supreme Court who thought that, they thought that they could control him, just like throughout history. Everybody thinks, business people, courts, they can control one of these kind of guys, these dictators. Well, the Supreme Court is going to find out, because this case will probably go back up, and I have no doubt that at some point he is simply going to openly defy the Supreme Court, because as we've discussed, the federal courts don't have a police force. They depend on essentially the goodwill of everyone to obey what they say. And once somebody like Trump says, sorry, I'm not going to obey it, there's nothing they can do.
Yeah, you said that's happening now. He's openly defying the Supreme Court right now. It was a 9-0 decision.
Well, Nathan, if I may say, they're trying to find.
It was a 9-0 decision.
It was a 9-0 decision, Nathan, but I'm sure Phil would agree with this, that the Supreme Court left enough wiggle room in the interpretation of their ruling. And that's what the Trump administration is doing right now, is doing what they always do, is they're playing a little word play there, because I think what they took out, they changed the word from effectuate to facilitate his return, which is what the lower court judge had said, was that the government needed to effectuate his return. The Supreme Court changed that language in their 9-0 ruling, which I think Justice Roberts made a lot of concessions so that he could get a unanimous decision. They wanted this to be a unanimous decision. And I think in order to get Clarence Thomas and some of the conservatives on the Supreme Court to side with some of the liberal justices, that they had to massage the language a little bit. And they massaged it just enough that it gives Trump enough wiggle room to say, because they're actually saying that the Supreme Court sided with their with them on this decision. So there's argument about, you know, who the Supreme Court was really siding on. Now, I'm not saying.
Well, there's no argument. They're just lying. They're saying the Supreme
Yeah,
Court ruled in their favor. It's just an outright lie. I mean,
sure,
that's
but
ridiculous.
it's an outright lie and it's political gamesmanship. But I think to say so far the Supreme Court hasn't held anybody in contempt of court or anything like that. So I think to say that it is an outright defiance, I think might be a bit of an overstep at this point. It's close, but it's a little bit of a technical overstep. And it'll be interesting to see. I blame the court because they could have come out and been much more clear in their language and just simply said, ordered the government to bring the guy back. They did not do that. They did not expressly say that in their ruling. They left enough ambiguity and wriggle room for the Trump administration.
I think they did say that, Kevin, but you're right. They played games with the word facilitate. What one was facilitate, the other was what, effectuate or something like this.
Yes.
Yeah, they played some games with that, but they did conclude that they have to bring him back. They did conclude that, and for the Trump people to claim that it was just the opposite, I mean, is a total stretch. And speaking of what you said about defiance, the next step is going to be today, I think at 4:00, there's a hearing in front of the trial judge. The trial judge could very well and probably should hold the Trump administration in contempt, which can mean a fine, jail, whatever the heck. But my guess is if that happens, Trump will then appeal that up to the Supreme Court, and then push will come to shove whether the Supreme Court then upholds that contempt citation or doesn't. And the scary thing is if they uphold it and he just says, screw it, I'm not going to do it, you know, what happens then?
Yeah, thank you for clearing that up, Phil. I'm glad, and I knew your legal mind would be able to explain that a little bit better than I did. And what Phil just outlined is where I think we get to the point of where you can have a real conversation about constitutional crisis if it gets to that point, because I think that is the push come to shove moment that we'll see. We'll find out from both the Supreme Court, and we'll find out whether what Trump said in that clip about how much he actually respects the Supreme Court, whether that'll actually come to bear or not.
What if Trump and his administration says, okay, we're going to agree with what the Supreme Court says, and then he turns it back over to El Salvador's president, and El Salvador's president says, we're not going to let this guy go.
That already happened.
Okay,
Tarris, that happened yesterday, but that's a phony thing because this guy in El Salvador, he's a government contractor. They're paying him $5 or $6 million to house these people. Okay, so it's all game because everyone knows. And the fact that Trump and this guy would sit there in the White House yesterday and pretend that, oh, we can't do anything because this guy says he's not going to return it, it's all BS. The fact is, we're paying this guy, he's a contractor, to do this, and we can easily tell him to return somebody. So it's all a game.
That's the one thing that I wish that no media in that room said to President Trump, why don't you just ask the president of El Salvador to return the guy? They did everything but that. Trump never addressed that directly. You're going to sit here and tell me that if the president of the United States tells El Salvador to send that guy back, that he's not going to do it? No, as Phil said, it was a bunch of bunk and it was a bunch of gamesmanship and lies and back and forth, that if Trump had said send him back, El Salvador would send him back. They're not going to buck back against the United States. This crap about, there's nothing that the United States can do. It's all a bunch of to borrow a Joe Biden phrase, it's a bunch of malarkey. Okay, you absolutely can get this guy back, but Trump is not going to. He's not going to say that. He's not going to make that statement. He's going to continue to play the games that he's playing and act like they can't do anything. And I think any thinking person, again, I always say this: if you're somebody who thinks, if you're a thinking person, you know that's a bunch of garbage.
But on a perspective of somebody who's trying to promote fear, like the Trump and the fear that he's trying to promote to the Hispanic communities, let's say, that he's coming through with ICE and deporting people, this is a good fear tactic, would you say? That he has this guy over here that they're questionable about, and he's backing it up. He's standing on his Trump 10 toes, and he's saying, hey, and that creates more fear in the Hispanic community, that keeps people from going to school, that keeps, I mean, it's just, I agree with you guys 100%. I think that it's all a game and it's all for showmanship. This is a political grandstand that this guy's got involved himself in. But, like, I don't think he's valuable enough to the Trump administration to do anything except using for what they're using for right now, and that's to exacerbate fear.
Yeah, and I would say that, like, that word game they're playing doesn't really make a difference. Whether it was effectuate or facilitate, either way they're defying the intention of the SCOTUS decision. I mean, to the point where the Trump administration is saying, hey, we don't have to effectuate or facilitate. Like, what they are saying is, we don't even know where he is, and we don't have the ability to bring him back, which in my opinion is nothing more than a lie. But this is their defiance tactic. And, Phil said this earlier, SCOTUS, federal, they don't have their own police force or their own military to enforce this on the executive. So, a lot of smart people, not Trump, who are around him, has spent a lot of years studying these type of situations, like what can happen, pros and cons. If we do this, then what can be, the counter move to it. And so they've been preparing for this for a long time, and they mean this. So yeah, is it a fear tactic? Sure it is. But it's a fear tactic, not just for so-called illegals, a point I made on a previous podcast. This is about all of us. Because if they can pick up this man off the street and inside of 3 days have him in El Salvador, they can do the same thing to you. And there's nothing that anybody can do about it.
Absolutely.
Just like there's nothing anybody can do to make them bring this man back, you could be in the same situation. And that's the power move that he's making on this country. It's a straight authoritarian move. Like, look, get out of line, and you'll be in El Salvador with these really, really bad MS-13 types. You don't want to be there. And that's exactly what they're making, the move that they're trying to make.
Yeah. I think the problem with it is even if you are somebody who is a staunch border guy, hey, let's get all of the illegals out of here type thing, especially the criminals. Even if you are that type of person, you gotta be concerned about just the lack of due process, right? That's going on. Where, I mean, Trump is sending the message, hey, if I don't like you, this could be you. They had no evidence, regardless of what the attorney general said. This guy, I think the evidence was shown that he was not a member of this gang that they said that he was. Right. And yet and still, despite the evidence showing his innocence or the lack of proof that they had to say who he was, this guy is still in an El Salvadorian prison. So this says to everybody that, and it's consistent with his bully tactics. We'll probably get into this in other topics, but if Trump can't lord the federal government's money over you, if he can't lord the agencies that report over you to try to intimidate, your business or whatever it is that you're running into, if he can't threaten to pull funding from you, if you don't go along with what he says, he will fire you from the job if you go against his agenda and you happen to work for the government. These are the types of bully tactics that Donald Trump is running. And I don't know what it's going to take. I mean, I guess it's one of those things where, for a lot of people, they don't care until it arrives on their doorstep. And that's the unfortunate thing about sometimes the attitudes that you see among some people in this country is they could give a rip about if you're being raked over the coals as long as it don't touch them. But once it touches them or somebody in their family, then their eyes are open, and suddenly they want to develop this sensitivity or this sense of justice when it lands on their doorstep. And I think collectively as Americans, we got to look at what Donald Trump is doing right now and saying, this ain't good for anybody.
And there's a famous quote that I think everybody's heard, but I think it's worth repeating. It says by a German philosopher, Niemöller, who said, first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not because I was not a Jew. Then they came, and there was no one left to speak for me. And I think what you guys are saying, and I agree 100%, is eventually these people who are going along with this or refusing to speak out, eventually it'll come to them. But by then it'll be too late.
And, I see somebody, Mayosha writes, Myosha writes, SCOTUS is to blame for all of this, especially conservative justices for basically saying he can do whatever he wants without accountability. And I've heard that. But the reality is, this falls squarely back on the electorate. That's who's the blame for this. Goes back to Hillary. We tried to tell you. We tried to tell you back when Hillary was running that you got to worry about the Supreme Court. You got 2 or 3 court seats that might be up. People were too caught up with the 90s crime bill and don't want to vote for a woman and all this other nonsense. The Republican Party was successful in beating Hillary, putting Trump in place. And darn it, it's like we didn't learn our lesson. We put this fool back in office again. And even when he's got family members telling you that he was raised with a mother and father that didn't show him love, that taught him to be basically a sociopath. His family members, not me, his family members, look it up. And we still, and I say collectively, we with a distance, because I was smart enough not to vote for this fool. I can look my kids in the face in 10, 15 years and tell them, your daddy knew better and tried to tell people. But other fools either didn't vote or they voted for this guy, and they are who are to blame for this. It's us. It's us,
Nathan,
100%.
Just hope you ain't looking at your kids through iron bars in El Salvador.
I might be.
Oh, come on.
I might be.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something, I've thought about. We sit here, we're on the local level, we're a couple guys talking about this, but eventually it would not surprise me if this comes down to even folks like us. If it comes down to people just on the local level who are speaking out on this, and suddenly there are consequences, because that's just the way these things work.
Absolutely. If listen, if you don't already know that, you are in for a rude awakening. Absolutely it is. And people know already, because I can see the kind of things that people are posting and what they're not posting. People are scared little rabbits, and they should be, because they don't want to lose their jobs and they don't want to lose their homes and they don't want no problems whatsoever. I see it all the time. So I know I got a target on my back, but so be it. So be it. Somebody got to do it.
It brings up the topic, and I know we're going to talk about the colleges, but it also applies to these law firms that, it's like some of them, and I understand the financial pressure, but some of them that have been blacklisted are choosing to fight. They're choosing to say that, yeah, maybe if we cut a deal with Trump, then our business, our law practice will continue. But the ones I admire are the ones that are saying, no, we're not going to do this, because you give this, you start making deals with this guy, and then he owns you, and there's not going to be any true legal opposition to stuff that's going on. So I definitely salute those law firms, and I salute the attorneys who quit the law firms that cut deals with Trump. And I know you're going to talk about the colleges, same kind of thing. Either people are going to have to fight and put the country first, or they're going to have to cut deals just to save their own self-interest.
Yeah, for folks who don't know, Harvard has basically, they're shooting back, they're pushing back, they're offering resistance to Donald Trump and his desires basically to stifle their freedom of speech, their diversity efforts, and basically their academic curriculum is all on the line. But Harvard this week said, nah, we ain't going with it. In response, within 24 hours, the Trump administration froze about $2 billion in federal tax dollars for Harvard. And now the Trump administration is taking aim at their federal tax exemption. And this is all retaliation. I love what Obama said, though.
I don't think it's a tax exemption. They're just not giving them money. They're going to cut off the money that they've been giving them.
Well, it's both. It's both. As I put up here right now,
Okay.
the Trump administration is investigating how they can take away the university's tax break as well. But I love what Obama said. Obama came out and said, look, Harvard has set an example for other higher ed institutions rejecting an unlawful and ham-handed attempt to stifle academic freedom while taking concrete steps to make sure all students at Harvard can benefit from an environment of intellectual inquiry, rigorous debate, and mutual respect. Let's hope other institutions follow suit. And I'm thinking about these higher institutions of education here in Ohio. I mean, the University of Cincinnati, Ohio State, many of them they just couldn't wait to capitulate and bend over. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a clear violation. This has to be unlawful. And I'm just glad that Harvard is doing this. And what I hope would happen is that other institutions will get some strength from this and follow suit. Somebody has to resist. and it should be the people that's got the resources to do it.
Well, it may not be, Nathan, it may not be unlawful. And because, and this brings up an issue we've talked about before. I don't think you guys agree with me on this. I don't think the federal government should be given any money to colleges and universities, because once you do, you're in their pocket. Okay. Once you do, that's why a lot of throughout in the Vietnam War and the defense contractors really benefited from military research that was done at colleges and universities. And there's a college in Michigan. I don't agree with their political point of view. It's Hillsdale College, but I do respect them because they do not take any government money. And the truth is, a country that has a $36 trillion debt, it really can't afford to be given $9 billion to Harvard, which has an endowment of, I think, 50 to 100 billion a year. Okay. But again, what all this points out is when you take public money, you are at the mercy of who's ever in charge. So I hope this leads to, frankly, ending public money for universities and colleges so they can truly have academic freedom.
I got to call you out on your inconsistency real quick, Phil. I got to call you out because when we talk about
just don't call me a socialist like some have.
When we talk about federal money, I just heard you correctly. You're saying, well, federal money shouldn't go to these schools because it gives too much control over the schools. But when we talk about state money, you're all in favor of taking our tax dollars and giving it to private schools and vouchers. I mean, via the vouchers. What's up with the lack of consistency?
Yeah. I think that's a bit of a stretch there, Nathan. I know you like to stir things up and get it going, but I think that's a bit of a stretch there. Okay, like for example, when Nicole last time, which by the way I might say I think was her example very much in my favor. Okay. I don't think anybody at the government was telling her. She just they gave her an opportunity and a choice, and she took advantage of it. I don't think they said to her, hey, you got to stop doing this or you got to stop doing that, whatever. I think that produces more freedom. So with all due respect, I think the situations are a bit different.
Let me say it again, how the situations are absolutely congruent. The only difference is we're talking about federal money as opposed to state money. But what you just said is you do not believe.
So what are the strings that Nicole?
But that's not the issue, though. The issue is you just said that you don't believe in the government giving money to universities. So why is it that you support the government giving money?
I'll tell you one point. No, I'll tell you a point that I should have just mentioned, though I mentioned before, is that the whole business of the federal. I'm talking about the federal government now. The whole business of the federal government.
It's still
supporting
tax
education. I don't care if it's. Excuse me. Let me finish. The whole business of the federal government supporting, whether it's the education department, whether it's money to local schools or money to universities, it is unconstitutional. The 10th Amendment is very clear in saying that unless the Constitution gives the federal government, not the state, the federal government, the right to spend money on something, it is reserved to the states. So your point that is probably the most important point here. It is unconstitutional. It is not unconstitutional for a state government to do that. And in fact, the voucher program in Ohio was upheld by a previous Supreme Court that wasn't the same, didn't consist of the same guys we have now. So that
explains your inconsistency. What explains it is that
there's no inconsistency. It's
that's your opinion about it being unconstitutional. I mean, I don't what court.
Well,
court presidents?
You can read
what
it.
Court
the
case?
10th Amendment is
in
very,
what
very
court
clear
case
on
was
this.
it established that it was unconstitutional? None that I know of. So what you're saying is that's the difference in your mind. It's like you just don't believe that the federal government should do anything with our tax dollars. I get it. Okay.
No, I don't say that. I think they should spend money on the military for sure, and I think they should deal with pollution
but not education.
And things like that.
But not
cross
education.
State lines.
But not education. I got it.
No, and I think there is constitutional support, for them doing those kind
You
of
can
things
think
I
that.
just mentioned. But I do not believe, and you're right about something, Nathan. There's no question that over the years, the federal courts have basically kind of
Because
allowed
it's not
this to happen,
unconstitutional, Phil.
come up with all kinds of Commerce Clause excuses and winding excuses to justify the federal government spending stuff and doing regulations that never
I
permitted
think
by the
it's
Constitution.
I
It is
think
a
it's
slippery slope, and it is true. We've totally
I
gone
think it's
down that slope.
ridiculous.
No
I think it's
question.
ridiculous for any American to argue that the federal government should not have a role in educating its citizenry. I think that's a matter of national defense. I think it's good for the economy and capitalism to have an educated
It's
to have
bad
an
for the
educated
schools.
population. So it is a ridiculous notion to say that the government shouldn't have any role in educating its citizenship. Dare I say it's an asinine
No,
point of
federal
view to
government.
hold.
No, federal.
Well,
Don't we
Federal,
pay
federal,
not
federal
state,
state.
taxes
federal,
still?
Federal.
federal, state, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's all taxpayer
It
dollars.
does matter because
It,
the Constitution makes very clear that in the 10th Amendment, just read the 10th Amendment, any function that is not delegated to the federal government in the
But
Constitution
Phil,
goes to the states. And that's why there's perfect constitutional basis for the state to fund education, whether through money to public
yeah.
schools or vouchers.
Yeah, I
Either
mean,
one.
That's
we
why I
all pay
agree.
federal taxes. That means the federal government should be addressing the particular needs and interest and safety of its citizens. That's just what it is.
No, it's not. It's not unlimited right. The federal government does not have unlimited right to do whatever they
I didn't.
want or to
I'm not
spend money on
arguing that
whatever
they
they
do.
want.
I'm
It
just
is not.
arguing that, and I think that Kevin put it very eloquently. Like, I pay federal taxes. I want my federal taxes to come back and work for me and benefit me and
hey, look,
benefit all of us.
if I wanted to make a constitutional case for funding education, again, I'll just say what I said. I could lump that easily into national security, which goes to military defense. It's a matter of national security, and in the interest.
You're stretching.
No,
You're
I'm
stretching
stretching
it
it
like
I'm
Trump is.
stretching it like
You're
you
stretching it out
I'm
just
stretching
like
it like
Trump
you
is.
stretching it, Phil. But if I wanted to make that case, I could say, and I believe this wholeheartedly, and I think anybody with common sense would agree that an educated population is essential to national security, the functioning of our economy, and everything.
So a well-fed population. You can say anything.
I mean, you can
Sure.
say
You're
anything,
stretching
but
it.
it doesn't mean
on.
it's going to make any sense. With this, what
Well,
Kevin
this
is
is what Trump
saying,
is doing with that alien. Trump is doing the same thing with that Alien Enemies Act. He's taking this thing and
I don't
stretching
think
it
that's
way
a
out
fair
here. That's exactly
comparison
what you
to
guys
what
are
Kevin
doing.
said, in my opinion, at all. I mean, I think he makes a solid point. Are you arguing that an ignorant, uneducated populace doesn't threaten our national security? Is that what you're arguing?
It already is
I think it's. I
by the
think it.
fact that we've elected the fool that we currently got running the country. A
Absolutely.
whole lot of idiocy, ignorance, and uneducation have us where we are right
Well,
now.
I wish it was just ignorance, but I can tell you this much. I hang out with a crowd of people, I would say mostly white, if I had to generalize, it's not all, but mostly white evangelicals. And a couple of these, quite a few of my friends are highly educated, and that they have bought into this Trump thing as much as anybody has. So it isn't just ignorant people,
It
unfortunately.
I got a
is.
couple.
But go ahead,
Well,
Tarris.
I got a couple points.
As my mom used to say, there's book sense and there's common sense. Just because you well educated don't mean you ain't ignorant.
Yeah, I agree. Or as the Bible says, there's knowledge and there's
absolutely.
wisdom. Same thing.
A couple of takeaways that I've got from this: when the federal government gets involved, especially like in
As
education,
long as you agree with me,
yeah, like
Tarris, you
when
go right ahead.
education, the federal government gets involved, it slow the process up. Just like bureaucracy, like as far as like let me hear me out. The transportation department, let's say the transportation department on a local level, and a county in Ohio might not have the same needs as another county in a inner city in Ohio. So whenever you start getting the federal government involved in what the educational needs in California might not be the same educational needs in Kentucky. So when you start putting this
Exactly.
blanket federal money out there, and then let me
One
finish,
size
Phil,
fits
man.
all.
Come
That's
on, let me
what you're
finish.
saying.
I'm agreeing with you, but I'm
Go ahead.
trying to thought
I'm
to go away.
agreeing.
When you
Go
start
ahead.
putting this
Right.
money
Go
out
ahead,
there, and then
sorry.
you start taking the people in Kentucky who need the money for different things, and then it's not allocated through this funds, and you got to go through all this bureaucracy. I think that's where the federal government needs to step out, and it needs to be state stuff. But when you start talking about colleges, where we're talking about Harvard and all this, when you start breaking down these board of directors and stuff like that, when you get to like the breaking down the president of a university. She's just like the ceremonial figurehead. Most of these people on these boards, they probably agree with the DEI, the getting rid of the DEI. They're like, oh, let's get rid of it. Let's get rid of it. When you get to that, I mean, when you get to the board, I think we should start looking at these presidents and start looking at the boards, the people who make the decisions about, okay, let's go along with the get along to get rid of DEI, which I think they should. But I think more people agree with it. But then when it comes time to resisting it, if not, more people would have resisted against it instead of came out and said, we're going to just go along with it.
No, I think what it is it comes down to the dollars and cents. And again, getting back to the original point and the point of conversation is hats off to Harvard, because this is the type of thing that is going to take. You know, I had a friend who used to have a statement saying that all money ain't good money, you know, and this is the case right here, that Trump money is not good money because it comes with too many conditions that require you to compromise what you stand for and what you believe. And I think that what people have got to get used to, which is what Harvard clearly was willing to do in this case, is you got to remember to stand up to injustice or to stand up against wrongs. There's going to be some pain and suffering involved. If you want to get rights, if you want to maintain rights, to stand up to the bully, you might have to get hit in the face a couple of times in the fight and be willing to take that and continue to keep coming back. We forget that when we were fighting for civil rights in this country, you got sprayed with water hoses, arrested in jail, dogs were sicked on you. There were all types of injustices that were perpetrated on people, pain and suffering that was perpetrated in the fight for justice. We've gotten too comfortable in this country with not having to take a hit to stand up, not being willing to take a hit to stand up for what's right. I see it all the time in the paper. People are scared to express their opinions just simply because they don't want to get blowback, the invariable blowback that they're going to get from people. Like, they'll have a strong belief, but they won't put their name to a guest column or a letter to the editor because they're afraid if they do that, you know, the mob is going to come after them, you know, and so they'll just suck it up and they won't say anything.
And it might.
And I think, and while I understand it, I say that is a cowardly position that we have to be willing to move forward. People are not willing to risk what is necessary in the face of injustice to defeat it. Donald Trump is betting that there are a lot more University of Cincinnati's and other entities that will bend the knee, that there are more of them than there are Harvards who are willing to stand up against him. That's the cynical approach that Donald Trump is taking. And unless Americans are prepared to stand up against and challenge that, then he is going to continue to run roughshod.
Do you think that the people on the board of directors at University of Cincinnati, do you think that they are against DEI? Or do you think, I mean, because if they were, you think they would have gave up a bigger?
No, I think they're for. I think most of those boards are for
DEI.
DEI. I think most.
Why
are for
would they
DEI.
be against an initiative that makes their university better and stronger? Why would they be against?
Because most of these people on these boards are white people. So why would they want to? Why would they want to spread the thing around?
I disagree. College boards, by and large. First of all, if they were against DEI policies, they wouldn't have them in place now.
Here's what I would say on that, and I think this is the point that Tarris is trying to make, and I don't think I entirely disagree with it. Look, prior to Trump, we were living in an era where we were pushing for a lot of progress and a lot more equality that made people who wanted to push back on these sorts of things sort of out of vogue. Like, it wasn't popular. It wasn't popular for you to say that DEI wasn't a good thing prior to Trump because we were moving into such progressive spaces. And I do think that there are a lot of people. I think the point that he's making is if you look at the makeup of these boards and you probably ask, who do a lot of these CEOs and these high level people who serve on these boards, who did they probably vote for? They probably didn't vote for Kamala Harris. They probably voted for Donald Trump, yet and still, even though they sit on these boards. So maybe they went along with DEI because they kind of had to, because it wasn't popular to be against it, and they didn't particularly want to hurt their brands. But one of the things that we've seen since Donald Trump is he's made it comfortable for a whole lot of those people to come out of the woodwork and stand 10 toes down on stuff that they might not have been willing to 10 years ago.
And let me
And I
go a
think
step
that's
further
what
than that one.
Tarris is
Let me
trying
go
to-
a step further with that one. When they get out of the room and when they're talking about that DEI and they don't agree with it, but they're going along to get along. And whenever they get in a room and they get a chance to hire somebody in that DEI position, this is why I try to hold my friends who are white accountable and say they dropped the ball. They hire their cousin who is nepotism or their cousin who needs a chance. They never go along and do the right thing. They say, oh, yeah, that's why I'm like, good, let's get rid of DEI, because they say they're going to do the right thing every time. And as soon as they get in the position to do the right thing, they never, I have not seen one of my white friends do the right thing yet. Put in
Now,
the
what's
right
the right
position.
thing in this story now? What
The
are you
right
saying?
thing is to look at someone who is better for the job, whether it be who's black, white, whatever. They won't. They look strictly for the person who's, in my opinion, white and who fits what they want to push on their white tea supremacy. I hate to be that way, but that's the way I feel when they get in these boardrooms.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of this could be possible. Like, is it possible that you got people on these college boards, to the point you guys was making, Tarris and Kevin, that have secretly always had a problem with DEI? I mean, yeah, I mean, I can't say otherwise. But I think what's probably more plausible in my mind is that these individuals understand what DEI really is and how it strengthens their universities and their communities and the overall product of what they have to offer for potential, college graduates or people who go to college. I think that's far more plausible,
So
right?
can I ask you, if I can ask you this, if that's the
Sure.
case, then why in these DEI do they lump everybody together? If you go, like when I will go over to my alma mater, NKU, they put the LGBTQ, the African American, all of the minorities and the marginalized, they put them all in one place and say, congregate to here. And then they don't get down to each individual needs, because the LGBTQ community might have a different need than the African American community straight person, but an African American straight male might not want somebody advocating for him from the LGBTQ community because we have different kind of struggles. But if we're lumped all into one thing, that's why I think like what they say.
I don't know what you mean by lumped all into one thing. You mean like in one location, like one building?
One location, one voice, one room, one time to speak. Like, okay, say if you get to go chance to speak to the board of directors in there and say, okay, well, we're going to give the DEI department 30 minutes, and in the 30 minutes, they got to talk about the African plight, the LGBTQ plight, the black plight, everybody's plight. And I believe that it needs to go down to get rid of the DEI stuff and get rid of people who really care about building a team. Because being, like I said, when you look
But those
at
two
these
things
boards,
are not at odds with one another. You do realize that, like, DEI is not a contradiction to what you're saying you want people to do. It actually all works together.
not if
So I
the
hear what
people
you're
who are
saying.
in the
I'm trying
board,
to
the people in the
I'm
board,
trying
if
to
the people,
understand what you're saying, Tarris.
if the people in the boardroom are not following through with the practices that are in law for them to follow through and practice, and they're not, and the results are not being, if the results are, they're supposed to be doing DEI, but white women are the most received recipients of DEI and black people are last on the totem pole, then what are we doing this for? Why are we fighting for DEI for? That's why I don't agree with it. But I'm saying, and a lot of these white people are like, yeah, we're not going to hire these black people anyway. But so they're still going to fight for DEI. So that's why we just need to leave them alone.
Yeah, I don't think that. It just sounds to me, and I could be wrong. It just doesn't sound like you have a working understanding of how these organizations are interacting, getting resources, and providing whatever they provide for people on these campuses. As someone who I was a teaching assistant in the women's program at UC, so I used to walk in these waters, even outside of my what you can look at me and see in terms of my characteristics. So it just doesn't seem consistent to what I understand and how I understand all of that actually works. Like, if you're making an argument that these organizations need more resources so they can have their separate buildings and ceremonies and rituals, okay, I'm with that.
Yes.
But to suggest that somehow DEI is hurting college campuses could not be further from the truth.
As I'm saying, it gives the board of directors the opportunity to say, okay, here's your department, and this department handles everything. and the people in that department who might be the people who are dispersing the funds, they might have an LGBTQ community focus base when it comes to focusing funds and educate or resources, and then leave the black minority community out and ostracize the black community.
No.
But you think that they're just going to be fair all the way across the board? What about the black
Well,
conservatives?
do you have any specific examples where it's not? So, for instance, my daughter graduated from a high school here in Cincinnati. She's in BGSU, which is up north, Trump country, PWI. But she was able to find black female groups, right, where she could be around people like her, find some fellowship, find her community. And they've got other groups that speak to other minorities. I don't see what the problem is. Like I think people are trying to make DEI into something. Not I think people are certainly trying to make DEI into some kind of destructive force when it's the
Right.
exact opposite. And that's the reason why these boards of directors at these various college campuses have allowed it to continue and actually put resources into it, because a more diverse environment is better for everybody on any campus. Everybody benefits.
Sure. And I think a lot of the DEI programming, when you look at it, is based around, recruitment, retention of students, and sort of helping to make sure that the environment on campus is conducive for them to be successful, or for lack of a better term, make sure that they're comfortable, that there's something there for everybody. I think what often is the problem when we have these conversations, and I think particularly with majority white communities, is they believe in their mind they've created sort of this homogenous environment everywhere that you go, why can't you just fall in and sort of be comfortable? But what they fail to realize is that they've created an environment that's comfortable for them most oftentimes, and that diverse people have had to adapt to a situation that they're already comfortable with no thought about, hey, this wasn't really built with you in mind, right? And anytime you start talking about modifying that in some way where you make it more comfortable for different types of people, it makes it more uncomfortable for them, because it's changing their norm and what they're used to. And it looks like it's a foreign intrusion of some kind, but they're blind to the fact that what has been created is not exactly comfortable and totally made to fit in for people who are not like them. And I think that that's always the thing when we start talking about DEI and creating diversity and why it's important, is making it comfortable for others often makes them uncomfortable. And that is what the biggest challenge with DEI is their inability to adapt and morph with the changing environment in the way that minority groups have had to do for the entirety of their existence in this country. And that's the fight that you're fighting with DEI. It's not about anybody getting anything that they didn't earn. I mean, hell, if you want to make that or getting an unfair advantage, I mean, hell, if you want to make that argument, and I've said this plenty of time, white people have been the biggest, the white men in particular have been the biggest beneficiaries of DEI of anybody on the planet, because for, literally hundreds of years, they were able to exclude women, minorities from even participating in the process. So if you don't call that an advantage, I don't know what the hell is.
And that's my argument about DEI. White men will get in here and then they'll say, we're going to do DEI, or they're forced to do DEI. Then they'll hire their sisters and their aunts. They're white. They're not passing it on to educated black men or educate. We got to fight even harder. They'll pass it to their aunts or their cousins, or they keep it. It's nepotism. They keep it all amongst themselves. Then they go around laughing about how DEI. And so I really think inherited in there. That's why I'm saying if the board of directors at these places would have cared about DEI as much as what we are fighting for DEI, and we are the least on the last on the totem pole on receiving benefits, let it go. Let's find a different way. Because I don't think, not for 1 minute do I not think that there should be groups for specific sororities, fraternities, black organizations. There should be all those social organizations. But when it comes to, I think there should be merit-based things. And I don't think that the DEI should be funded federally. That way they could take it away as they please and as they go. Any of this federal money, that's why I think that Trump used it. That's why he's using it. He's like, all right, you don't like what I'm saying? Federal money, we're just going to take it away from you. I see it in city government. I see it in local government now. What, like for instance, just a parks and recreation. Let's say in Cincinnati, if they want to do a project in Small Lake Park, and they have this projected project that they want to do, and they're going to say, oh, because we're promised this federal money, but they get out of line and they don't get this federal money, then the project goes on. I mean, I just see in this bureaucracy that we have going on, which the educational complex system is engraved in this American system, American flag, ever since federal loans got involved and Sally Mae and all that, and doctoring through the education system, it's involved. So if we're thinking on that level, I don't think that DEI has helped black people in one bit. That's why I'm like, let's get rid of it. Let's move to something else.
Well, certainly.
Well, I don't think that's a true statement. I think there's a difference between
Not
saying
at all.
I think there's a difference between saying DEI hasn't helped black people and saying that DEI hasn't helped black people as much as we would have liked for it to have helped them. So I think those are two different statements. One which is plausibly true, the other which is not. I mean, nobody in their right mind would look at DEI or affirmative action measures and say that black people have not benefited from those. Now, can we look at things?
Folks will say that, Kevin. They say
yeah, nah. Well, I've
heard people make that argument.
It's like anybody who would say that is a fool and just doesn't like objective facts. I mean, the reality is that most of us stand on the shoulders of people who benefited, by these federal government inactions that made it possible for black people to get opportunities and to stop bias and prejudice from stopping you to get through the door. Look, I love going back to these little history lessons, and for any black person who wants to say that the federal government is a villain, you better wake up and smell the coffee. Now, I'm not going to say that the federal government has been perfect, and the federal government has done a lot of things to help black people. But if it wasn't for the federal government, first of all, after slavery, it was the federal government that it was necessary to keep the racists and the Southern folks, down South off your back when you were released and during the Reconstruction period. That's why black folks were able to flourish for such a long time, not because American society suddenly became more equal and racism and prejudice went away. No, it was because they had federal troops on the ground making sure that the KKK and other people didn't roll up in your crib or your business and burn it down like they eventually did when the federal government rolled all of that back and took away federal protections. So you better wake up and recognize that black people's progress has largely been dependent upon the protection of the federal government. So it's a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword for black folks. It's a double-edged sword.
Can I offer an alternative perspective?
Hold on one second, Troy. I want to highlight what Kevin said. That what you just said, I have been saying for years, and we need to keep saying that. The reason why you able to walk freely in different neighborhoods is not because the good white folks in your neighborhood just changed their heart. It was the federal government that forced them, right, to not abuse you the way they did going back to, let's say, the Red Summer of 1919, where they were just running through black neighborhoods, taking us out one by one. It was the federal government that forced them to allow Ruby Bridges to integrate those schools, because without it, they would have tore her to pieces, literally. So now when I hear these idiot black folks talking about federal government, what did it do? It just blows my mind. I'm like, you must not have paid attention in school. That's the only thing. I've heard black people say, what's the federal government done for me? Everything. They did everything for you. They set the environment that allowed your grandparents to come up north and get jobs and not get lynched. It was the federal government. It wasn't the Ohio State Patrol. It wasn't the Cincinnati police because they was racist as I don't know what. It was the federal government and the civil rights movement. And we are watching these people take that away from you. And I see black people thinking, do you not know what comes next? You don't understand what that means?
Yeah.
But I just wanted to highlight what you said, bro. 100% on point.
And I get it, Nathan, and I get it because it is a double-edged sword, because as much as the federal government has helped and protected black people, it's also been a detriment.
Exactly.
But that is why participation in the system and voting for the right people are important, because the systems are what they are in terms of how they're set up in this country. And that's why the vote and electing the people who are going to do the right types of things make a difference. When Lincoln was the president, you know, and that sort of thing, and you had a certain makeup of the Congress post Civil War and during the Reconstruction period, things were good. When that changed and things shifted, the folks in power who wasn't for that were able to roll back some of those federal protections and things that are there. So what I'm saying is that, yes, everything that we have and the progress that we've been able to make is largely because of the federal government and the right people being elected to those positions to enforce good and just policies, make it good. But absent that, you have no shot. Not participating in the system is not an answer to the things that you are upset about, right? It only leaves you more susceptible to those folks who wasn't never really for you in the first place, right? All of these people who are arguing against DEI, they're not for you in the first place. They don't want you to have, you know, what you do have at this point, because they're looking at you saying you got my piece of the pie, when that is not really the case at all. When we know that 90% of the wealth in this country is owned by like 10% of the people or something like that. I mean, that's crazy. And they got the rest of us fighting over scraps, believing we're taking it from each other when they got it all. And that's the crazy thing about, you know, just sometimes how we think. And that's why it's important to really know your history, to go back, look at your history, read a lot, watch a lot, sit back and think on it, man. You know, don't just sit up and take what even talking heads like us are going to say. I always say, hey, this is more information for you, but you got to do the work. You got to go back and check what we're saying. You got to learn and read for yourself and develop your own knowledge base. But if you don't know that history, man, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. I mean, it's about that simple.
I would like to jump in on I'd like to jump in what Kevin was saying and what Nate was saying as well. When you stopped at the 1920s, because whenever you're talking about the federal government came in after Reconstruction, Abraham Lincoln, the federal government came in, and black people were outscoring white people leaps and bounds, out reading in all the scores in education, building our own communities. And you're right, then who we elected after the 20s changed things. And after we changed things, that's whenever they came in, they were able to Black Wall Street and do those things to us. And in that same token, the federal government brought in the schools, the talented 10th, the people who the HBCUs. The federal government brought in all those people who are supposed to keep all the rest of the black people in line, so to speak. So the federal government, like they have done in education, they have hurt black community in education just as much. You're saying, y'all, they helped, and without us, we wouldn't have been able to do this, whatever that. But they also, with their federal fundings, controlled the black community as well, with the talented 10, the boule, the fraternities and sororities, and now as you move into now and where how black men are excluded, almost excluded from the post-secondary education plight.
Are you in a fraternity?
No, sir.
I can tell.
You're right. You're right. If I was in a fraternity, I would be in line with like everybody else.
You would have more insight and experience as to what these sororities, these black sororities and fraternities actually do. That's why I said that. But I could go back and forth with it and push back, but I want to move on. We got Phil back. He's back from walking his dog. And
That was a very personal matter. I'm concerned about you revealing this to the general
I didn't know
public.
it was no big deal. I just threw it out there.
No, I'm
But
I'm
let's go on to the
teasing. Go
next
ahead.
topic.
Go ahead.
So our new Senator John Husted is now co-signing a bill that would ban junk food from being purchased with SNAP benefits. His rationale is like, well, why should we, or at least in part of the statement he put out, and I'm paraphrasing loosely. Basically, he was saying, look, we already know that these sugary, highly processed foods can lead to a lot of health issues. Why should our tax dollars through the SNAP benefits program go to pay for these kind of things? And then on the back end, as taxpayers, we're going to have to foot the bill for their medical bills, right? So they want to exclude soft drinks, candy, ice cream, and pre-prepared desserts from being bought with SNAP benefits. And I'll take it to the crew. Is this a good idea or a bad idea in your opinion? What do you think?
Can you remind me, when we say SNAP, are we talking food stamps, or is that is it
Essentially
more than
food stamps. They don't use stamps anymore, but essentially we're talking about the same program.
that? Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay.
I want to jump in.
I think so. So here's what I think. I always say two things can be true at the same time. Am I someone who believes that folks should advocate for healthier lifestyles and eating good foods, particularly when you're talking about young children and that sort of thing? Absolutely. But I think this kind of gets into a little bit what we were talking about in the last pod about the government just kind of, going a little bit too far to get into folks' business, where now they want to start getting in your grocery cart and telling you what you can or cannot buy.
What about alcohol, Kevin? Isn't alcohol already prohibited?
It is. Yeah, it is. Here's the other issue that I would say this would be an even better policy if Husted had followed it up and said something like this, maybe a more palatable policy, is we also need to look at the neighborhoods where a lot of people who receive these benefits live and make sure that they aren't living in food deserts, that they actually live in places where they have a grocery store where they can get fresh fruits and vegetables to do their grocery shopping. That's, within a reasonable walking distance, or, at least along a bus line that they might ride to be able to get there and pick it up. If you're going, look, the reality is that most people who rely on government assistance to this degree, generally have some other economic challenges that are present with them. And maybe even in some places where they might live, which usually doesn't have access to grocery stores that provide the type of healthy, nutritional food that John Husted is suggesting. We write about this all the time in Cincinnati about, when a Kroger closes down in a major neighborhood and there's nothing left there but like a Walgreens or some kind of convenience store that doesn't sell that type of stuff, but sells the exact type of junk food that John Husted is saying that folks shouldn't be able to use these SNAP benefits for. So I'm all for John Husted if he wants to say, hey, we want to make sure people who are receiving these benefits are eating healthy. Then take it a step further and say, hey, we need to develop policy to make sure that folks who receive these benefits also are living in neighborhoods and in communities where they can get access to the types of healthy options that we want them to take.
I'll jump in. You can't legislate morality. I'll say we can't legislate morality. In growing up, no matter where you're from, in my culture, food stamps were like, me and my family didn't qualify for food stamps, but like Anthony Posen just said, 75 for 50, hit me up, bro. My family would buy food stamps from the families who did qualify for food stamps to help them out. So if they're trying to legislate and say, oh, you can't buy certain food with food stamps cards, you can't legislate that, because someone's just going to sell their food stamp card to someone else and get the food that they want to get anyway. Does that make sense? So, yeah. They're not. Because we were getting our food stamp. We were at that point it was 1 for 1 for every dollar food stamp. You get $300 book of food stamps for $150. And my mom, we lived in a very nice neighborhood, but we'd have to go to the food and take the food stamp card, take a $5 food stamp thing, buy a piece of candy, get some change, so we can have some dollar bills, some quarters, and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? There's always going to be a way to beat the system. So they can say whatever they want, but you cannot legislate. Now I would say morale. You can't legislate anything. You can put as many bills as you want in there. We're gonna find a way to get what we want to get.
Phil, what's your take on it?
You know, I agree with the proposal. I really do, and I don't really think it's the same as legislating morality. To me, that's like whether you make drugs legal and prostitution and stuff like that. I actually don't have a problem with this, and I hate to say it. You're judged by the company you keep, but I think Sarah Huckabee, who I'm no Sanders, who's the governor of Arkansas, I think has a similar proposal. And again, I'm no fan of hers, but I agree with that proposal. You know, of course, you can always get around it. You get around it, and like we talked, you can buy alcohol. You can trade around if need be. But outside of that, I think requiring that it be within reason, that it be used for, you know, healthy foods as opposed to junk, I think it's a good thing. I don't see a downside.
Yeah, I think the other thing, and I think TNT, what's up, TNT? I see you in the chat. She brought up a good point. She says SNAP for most recipients is $6 a day, and Trump is cutting that. So they want you to pay for high-end inflated items with less money. So that's the other thing. I mean, and that is very true. Fruits and vegetables these days are very expensive. And of course, with these import tariffs going on right now, we know that type of stuff is not necessarily going to go down. So if you have only a certain amount of SNAP benefits that you're getting, you know, every month, you know, what is buying those healthier options going to cost you versus what you, I mean, look, there's one thing that we know: the processed foods and the junk food, they're a hell of a lot cheaper than it is going to the fresh meat counter and the produce stand and that sort of thing. You know, getting the healthier options. I mean, which is what I've always thought has been a crazy thing, is like the things that keep you alive cost the most, and the things that'll kill you the quickest you can get the cheapest. It's an insane way of pricing food, but I guess that, you know, that sort of flies in the face. You know, you're never going to hear any politician saying, hey, you know, it's easier to say, make sure the SNAP folks can't spend this stuff on junk food than it is to go and tell somebody to lower the prices on healthier options so that lower income people can quite possibly afford to eat healthy.
I don't know if this point was.
I feel the same way, by the way, about school lunches. I see no justification for serving fatty foods that are sugary foods to kids in school. Absolutely no.
And they tried to cut down on that.
They
tried to cut down on that. I mean, that was a big push during the Obama administration, if you recall. Yeah. I mean, that was one of their staple policies, was trying to get, you know, more nutritional meals in the schools. And I think, you know, I think those are things that everybody is sort of on board with. But I'm just saying, if you're going to push these policies instead of just saying what you're going to take away from folks, how are you going to enhance what you're going to do? So again, if Houston had put some more, or these legislators in Congress had put something more on it and say, fine, we don't want folks using SNAP benefits on unhealthy food options, but here are the things that we're going to do to increase their access to it, to make sure that they're able to do these things in a way that lines up with the results that we want. But they never do that. They always talk about what they're going to take away with
and the reason why. And there's a reason why, is because, this is just my opinion, John Husted don't really care about the people that are getting SNAP benefits. This is just low-hanging fruit. You know, he's going along to get along. They're doing this in a lot of different states. And to me, it's paternalistic and elitist. To even suggest that you need to tell somebody what to do with their money.
Hold on.
What about alcohol? You okay? Should they?
Let me make a point. I've heard some legislators talk about this before, and they're backing. And the reason is because, and I heard the legislators talk about this from an agricultural standpoint. You know what I'm saying? There's the people who are for the agricultural department of let's say, I'm not saying for, let's say, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, the Educational Department of the Commonwealth of Kentucky are talking about, let's advocate how they spend their SNAP benefits so they can therefore determine how the food that gets purchased by the SNAP benefits are purchased. So they can control, it's like you said, the elitists, the control stuff, man. When I first heard it, I was like, what? So that, and from my thought process is they want to grow the food, put it out in the market, and then control how the people who are, at least for the low-hanging fruit that have to qualify for these benefits, control what they're eating. That's what I got from it. And I could be off, but that's when I heard a legislator talk about it from an agricultural standpoint. They're like, if we can stop them from getting the processed foods, it would help out later on when it comes to Medicaid benefits and all that kind of stuff. So it's like preventative maintenance. If we can stop, it's not a slow play. It's a play for a longer term that if people are going to be getting SNAP benefits are the same people that are down the line are going to be qualifying for Medicaid and Medicare and stuff like that. So this elitist stuff that if we can control how they're eating, we can control the bills of how much we're going to have to pay for them in further medical. That's what I get from this stuff.
Yeah, it could be. But, like you said, it's like, once again, I keep saying that Republicans, when they get in control, I just cannot trust legislative Republican majorities anymore, because every time they do the same thing. They want to control the bedroom, the bathroom, the classroom, a woman's body, and now they want to control whether you put sugar in your body. Like, whose fault is it? Who is to blame for the fact that sugar is so much more cheaper than nuts and cheese and all the good stuff that you can eat? That's not SNAP benefit recipients' fault. That's the subsidies and the policies of this U.S. government. And, if they really cared about these people,
There's a lot of subsidies that go to farmers.
if they really cared about these people, you know what they'd be doing? They'd be talking about how we can increase their SNAP benefits because, as we all know, it costs a whole lot more money to eat healthier than it does to not eat healthier. So some of these folks just don't have enough money to eat healthy, right? Quite honestly. So if they want some creature comforts and you want some cookies or some ice cream, you go right ahead. That doesn't bother me in the least. And to a point that Tarris made earlier, they're really not thinking it all the way through, because this isn't going to stop anything. All this is going to do is that people are going to be selling their benefits. That's it. They're going to be selling their benefits to get some cash, which means less money or more money is going to be going out of the household, because it's usually like a 2-for-1 type of deal these days. If you want to buy, some food stamps, people still use that term or whatever. So it's not going to stop people from getting Snicker bars. All it's going to do is make them barter away more of their benefits to get hard-earned cash, and that's going to hurt the overall household. So again, I say, I just don't think that John Huston really cares about these people. He's just going along to get along with these other Republican majorities in other states. And if he really cared, to Kevin's point, there'd be more to it, and there isn't, because they don't really care.
Yeah, it's to your point, Nathan, is low hanging fruit, right? This is a type of legislation that'll play well with their base, because there's already this sort of belief that or stigma that is attached to people who receive any kind of government assistance of this type, that they're lazy, shiftless people who are just living off the government tea. Nathan, I know that's your favorite word right there. That if you're poor, it's your own fault and that sort of thing, which a lot of people who I remember I used to have a pastor who used to tell the story that none of us knew it. We all thought he was doing well, but he used to share with us that he was on food stamps, that he and his wife were on food stamps because they didn't make enough money through their various employment to be able to afford it. And he just talked about, like, everybody that you look at, you don't know what kind of assistance that they're getting or that they're in need of. So I think, this portrait that, oftentimes, and I will say it's oftentimes people on the right like to paint of people who get government assistance or people who don't want to work and who are just lazy and shiftless and who are trying to get over. But the fact of the matter is that there are quite a few people in this country who are trying to make it and who are trying to do the right thing, but they just need a little extra help because they don't make enough. And as we've talked on this program, as AI continues to grow and eliminates some of these lower level jobs, I think the need for this type of assistance is going to become even greater, because you're going to be eliminating, a lot more jobs that folks, who don't have the education or who might not have the skill base, used to be able to rely on just to kind of try to survive. So I think this notion of, again, just trying to police this, reduce it, or whatever, it's low hanging fruit for John Husted. I think my man Philip Turner, what's up, Buster? In the chat, he said, hey, they can try to police food, but they won't do anything about guns, right? This is an easy bill to propose. Probably fairly easy to get passed. You can go back to your district and say, look at what I did. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to move the needle one bit.
Well, it is. It's gonna impact negatively the households of the people with the SNAP benefits, because, like I said, they're just gonna barter it, and they're just gonna be bartering more of their money away now, or their benefits away, for real cash currency. And to me, that's destructive to the overall household. I think.
Yeah, no, I meant move the needle toward the improvement, the quote unquote improvements that they say this is.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right, it's not gonna move the needle in the direction that they say. Probably move it more in the direction that you're saying, Nathan.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So, but this is where we are in politics. I mean, this is a party that is, trying to basically destroy the social safety net. They're cutting Medicare, cutting Medicaid, cutting SNAP benefits. But at the same time, we want to tell you what to spend your money on. Hey, listen.
They're not cutting Medicare, and they won't, because it's mostly senior citizens who vote. Like yours truly.
In the new budget, to my understanding, if I'm wrong, they've got cuts to Medicare and Medicaid in the new budget that passed the House. If I'm wrong about that, set me straight on the next podcast. But I believe I'm correct. So, you got a lot of people out there. Like, I believe, and see, that's one thing people talk about, liberals and progressives. I gladly stand on that flag. And what that means is, I think that our government should be helping people. We should have a social safety net. As I've said before, none of us in any neighborhood benefits from having desperate, hungry people, especially with children, on these streets. Every last one of us is in danger if we've got a high concentration of people in those circumstances living around us, walking among us. It's a very dangerous thing. So, yeah, if we spend tax dollars, I do it gladly to help the other man, because what I understand is that if we allow people in our neighborhoods to go so low, it's going to come back and It's going to come back and bite us eventually.
Well, that may be the case. I happen to think that, and I felt the same way when they used to talk about a torture. It doesn't cause people to. It doesn't help. Doesn't work. Whether or not it's right or wrong, and I would say that people deserve to have food and medicine and clothing. I don't care if it helps me or helps other people or not. I would throw out what I've always believed. It may seem like kind of a radical thing, but it was a proposal many years ago by Milton Friedman called the negative income tax. And basically what it does is it says, get rid of all these programs and just give the money to people. That right now it's very paternalistic, because, we'll give you money, but you can only buy it for food, or you can only buy it for, I don't know. He basically said that we should have a system where it would all be based on income. Okay. On the one hand, the lower the income, the more you got. Okay. But there would always be an incentive in there to work. In other words, it would never take away the incentive to work. And in my opinion, I think that would be much more efficient than all these housing programs and SNAP programs and other programs. It's much more efficient, frankly, to just give people money, as long as it's set up, the efficiencies are set up, so everybody has an incentive to
but wouldn't that still be just another program? I mean, in terms of the implementation of it, it would just be another program.
It would be a program, but here's the thing. I mean, this is an example we're talking about. I mean, okay, the government. Do you know how much the government spends on bureaucracies, in government housing programs, these kind of programs. You have a huge bureaucracy that has to monitor, and now they want to, which I think is stupid. They want to say, "Oh, well, you've got to show you work" or something like that. I mean, it's an unbelievable amount of money spent that doesn't go to the people in need.
But with any program that you're facilitating funds to a portion of the population, you've got to have a system or a program or administrators or a bureaucracy that oversees it.
Well, yeah, but what I'm saying is you need a lot less. For example, this is the kind of thing could be done through the IRS.
Can't do everything.
Just basically,
some things are important enough that they should have their own federal and or state department that just deals with that.
Whether they do or not, that's not the point. That's not the point. The point is,
you're trying to make the point that we can just bundle these different things and put them under different umbrellas. And what I'm suggesting is that
no, I'm saying straight cash instead of the paternalistic thing where we tell people, low income people, "Oh, we don't trust you with this money. We're going to tell you."
That part is bad. But I mean, how is what you're suggesting any different than what we're doing now? You're not going to give people straight cash.
It's a lot different. I think what he's saying, Nathan.
Well, let me finish the point.
Oh yeah, sure.
Because what you're suggesting is then the government's not going to give anybody cash money. It's always going to be some kind of digital or electronic delivery, right? So who facilitates that? Someone's got to facilitate it from the government side, right? And so when I hear people talking about bureaucracy, you're talking about administrative costs. Like somebody has to make sure this program is going to who we think it's supposed to go to and that the program is running correctly. If that's what a bureaucracy does, good. We need that. It's called checks and balances.
Yeah, I think I kind of see what Phil is arguing here is that he's saying is that not that there wouldn't be some form of bureaucracy, but there wouldn't be a million of them. Like you wouldn't have a housing department, you wouldn't have a food department, you wouldn't have all of these different departments. You would have maybe the one department that was responsible for, dispersing money to people. I mean, I take it even in another direction. What the government can do is stop taking so much money in taxes out of people's paycheck and let me keep more of the money that
a lower income tax cut. Lower income tax cut.
Yeah, I mean, because look, one thing I will 100%. Agree with, and I don't know whether this is a conservative thought process or whatnot, but I believe that people know how to spend their own money better than the government does on themselves. And I don't like the notion of, and if you've ever gotten a large paycheck from where you work and you find that you get you're lucky if you take a third of that home after they take your taxes, that helps you understand that the government is taking a hell of a lot of money that you're working for every day. And you don't know exactly what they're doing with it. Yeah, they'll tell you, go check this website and this, that, and the other. But the fact of the matter
it doesn't apply to money over $125,000. In other words, it's the lower income and middle income people that have to pay that. Not the
and think about this: who couldn't use an extra, $10,000 or $12,000 in their household budget every year that the government is probably taking away from you to do various things? I tell you this much: extra $10,000 or $12,000. I can tell you that would change my household pretty significantly, and I think it would for a lot of other folks who go out and work every day. So again, this is not saying that the government shouldn't pay any taxes, but I think, on the conservative side of things, where you hear the arguments about limited government and what government should actually be taking your money for, I understand that argument to the standpoint of, would folks in this country be better off if they had more of their own money in their pocket versus government taking it all? And I think there's a reasonable argument to be made.
But that's not even
maybe so.
But see, that's such a one-sided, silly argument to me, because that's not even a real question. The other part of that question is, if we didn't have a federal government, would you be better off?
No, it's not about not having a federal government. It's about how much of your money they take. Because let's not forget.
But let's say none, right? Mm-hmm. So they take zero, right? So you don't pay no taxes whatsoever. So all the things that your local municipality, your state government, your federal government do, things that we just take for granted because they do them, right? How much is that worth to you? Right.
Well, no, I'm not saying that you don't pay any taxes. I don't think anybody is saying that, because I think there's a general understanding that there are certain things that the government need to do. They need to provide protection, take care of your streets. I think this gets into the conservative versus liberal argument. You know, a conservative would say, yes, there are certain things that the government should be doing, and we should contribute to that because we all use them. We all use roads. We all rely on police protection. We all rely on these various things. Now, short of those standard things that we all share, that we should all be contributing to, are you better off as an American having the rest of your money to provide your own housing, to get your own food, to do your own child care and that sort of thing, instead of giving it to the government and then waiting for them to create some kind of program where you got to jump through a whole bunch of hoops just to get approval to get back money that was already yours in the first place.
Exactly.
And I think
exactly.
I think there's a legitimate debate there. Now, people on the liberal side will say, well, if it wasn't for government providing these programs, we wouldn't have them. Well, you might not need them. If I might not need it if I had more of my own money. You know, that's kind of
so true.
argument.
Yeah, that's a
So
fool's
true.
gold argument. That's a fool's gold argument. But yeah, I hear people making an argument all the time, but it relies on people's ignorance about the things that they just don't know. So as we sit here, the government does a lot of things that impacts you either directly or indirectly that you just don't know about.
He's not going against that. That's not what he's saying.
Yeah, that's
He's not
exactly
saying,
what he's saying. Yeah.
no, he's not. He's not saying
Yeah.
they shouldn't build bridges and roads
Yeah.
and all that. He's just saying that that a system, which is what I'm talking about, which was a straight cash system, is going to put more money in the hands of lower income people than the current system because of so much spent to run these programs, the housing, the food, the everything.
What about the people that don't lack financial literacy, Phil? The people that you just give them this money and they're not going to.
You're taking the paternalistic argument. You're saying, oh, these people don't know enough what to do with their money. That's what you're saying.
No, I'm just saying, if you did that right now and just said, okay, we're just going to unleash and start giving it, it's going to take some time to like give people financial literacy. The same amount of time that it's taken to destroy people.
Okay,
30 years.
You're saying people are too dumb. You're saying low-income people aren't smart enough to know how to spend their own money.
I'm saying low-income people have been manipulated for the past 30 years, that if you just drop the kind of money on them, it's going to take some conditioning, the same amount or more, to uncondition the part that they've been conditioned. If you just start dropping, let's say a universal income wage, because I think they do this in France, just a livable wage and universal health care. I believe, and I agree, Phil, I think we all should have that. That's basic. But if you start doing that in how we live now, I think that would hurt people because I'm not.
But again, Tarris, that's that paternalistic mentality that we just got done criticizing. Is saying that I don't disagree with you. I think poverty mindsets are difficult things to get out of if people have been living a certain way for a certain time. I'm not saying that I disagree with what you're saying, but I'm saying on some level is that if I'm making money and I'm bad at managing my money, then that's not on the federal government to rescue me from that, right? I got to rescue me from that, right? You know, I don't think that it's reasonable to say that the federal government has an obligation to rescue me from my bad financial decisions. If they do, it's nice. I mean, who wouldn't turn down that sort of thing? But I would kind of agree that that's not the role of the federal government to manage people's money and then rescue them when they make poor decisions with that money that they make.
And look what they've done. Look what they've done with Social Security. Social Security originally, not to interrupt you, Kevin, Social Security originally was like it was a genuine trust fund. The money goes in there and it stays there. But you know what happened? The Congress got greedy. And they just basically take that money and they spend it. And then the money that's going for benefits has to come from people who are currently working. And we're getting into a situation I think we all know about. I don't know, what is it, 1930 or 2033 or something, where there's not going to be any money left because the federal government was so wasteful and frankly corrupt and taking that money. If they had just left the money in the trust fund, we would not have any issue about Social Security going broke.
That is not why. That is not why at all. But it also, the point I'm going to make about what you just said, Phil, is going to be a point I'll make about what Kevin and Tarris said. Is like, we save wealthy people all the time. We got a whole federal government and tax system, including the way we tax Social Security, that protects wealth and wealthy people all the
And
time.
I agree with that. I agree with
Right.
that.
So the problem
That's
with
true also.
the problem with Social Security is that I think the threshold is 1,700, 176,100 dollars is the threshold. Everything over that does not get taxed.
That's
So
what I just said.
If
I
you
just said that. You're
So
right.
here we are talking about we don't protect rich people from the mistakes, the financial mistakes they make, and here we are with a great example of that. Why is it that Elon
both
Musk, with
things
all
can be
his
true
money,
both things can be true at the same time, Nathan.
every single dollar that Elon Musk makes every single day, every single year in this country should be taxed through Social Security. The facts that wealthy people are not over $176,000 is the reason why Social Security is under dire straits.
Well, look, I mean, you can say what is the reason. The fact is, I totally agree with you, by the way, and I think Kevin or somebody else was talking about it's so unfair that
but you were trying to blame Congress. That's not the problem with Social Security.
No, Nathan,
it was rigged. It was rigged.
Let's say let's say they had been taxing Social Security no matter what your income was. But if the Congress chose to take that money and do what they did with they've done, and they spend it on whatever else, something else, you're going to be in the same problem because you don't have a genuine trust.
Help me understand, Phil, how, and if you can explain this in like 2 minutes, if you even know the answer, because I don't know the answer to it. So the money that we pay into Social Security, is that money invested in any way where it earns any type of capital on it?
No, originally that was the concept as any trust fund goes. Okay, but they have literally just taken the money and thrown it into all the other
so here's the budget.
There's no
so here's one of the things. Here's kind of my point is that, like, I think there have been some things that have been set up by government that we don't question. But when you really sit down and think about it, it makes perfect sense. So you work every day. The government takes your money out in Social Security and they supposedly hold it for you when it's there in retirement. And they'll show you the amount that you get, which for most people would be barely enough if that was all you were relying on to live month to month. Whereas if I were to take that same amount of money that the government was taking out, and I were to put it in even a reasonably low yield investment account, I would make significantly more money and would have significantly.
But it's not that they're making a bad investment, Kevin. They're just
I mean, and this is what I'm saying about some of the ways that we think about. We just kind of take for granted some of the things that the government does and the systems that they set up that say that. And I get it, some of it is a protection because you might say, well, somebody might get that money and they may not put it aside, so they might not have anything. Again, that is sort of that paternalistic, protective nature of government. But I think people who are more responsible would say, well, let me take that money myself and invest it and put it into something where I can get a larger return so that I can have more money when I get ready to retire than I would have through Social Security. So even having the option to quote unquote opt out, would be something that might even be considered to say, hey, let me pull my contributions and what I got. I want to opt out and I want to do something different and make my own contributions to my 401. I mean, that's basically what your 401k is on your job, more or less. You just
except there's real money in there. That's the difference.
You're not getting that same type of return with Social Security. And the government is essentially kind of, using your money as you're working to sort of pay for other people and whatever else they're doing. So I think like these are the types of things that are valid conversations and things to think about. Like we're at IRS, we're at tax season. Now I'm not going, I don't, it's not anything for me because I don't usually get, returns back from the federal government. But if you are someone who gets a return back from the federal government, then you make
a refund. You're about a refund.
Like if you get a tax refund back at the end of the year. Now think about this.
How about all that housing we talked about? Aren't you getting some depreciation?
Well, I'm not going to get into my tax portfolio, Phil, on the podcast.
All right.
But I would just say this: if you're let's just say if you're somebody who gets $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 back in a tax return, what that says to you is that the government has kept $2,000 to $5,000 from you all year long. Money that you probably could have been using every month to pay bills, make ends meet. Now, most people are just happy to get it when they get their return at the end of the year, but they never think about the concept that this is money the government has taken from you that they shouldn't have. And now they're giving it back to you at the end of the year when most people could use that money throughout the year to make their lives better. But we get so happy around this time when the refund come back, because quite frankly, you know why people get happy when the refund come back? Because now they're able to catch up on bills or take care of things that they weren't able to take care of for that year while the government had your money. I mean, so these are the types of things that when you start to think about it, you're like, man, and this is where I say, like, the government is a trip. They do some great things, but then there are some things that happen that people just don't question. And I'm always going to be of the mindset, I know what to do with my money better than the government does. Now, whether that's a liberal or conservative frame of thought, I don't know what that is. I know that's my frame of thought.
Right.
I know what to do with my money better than Washington.
Yeah.
And I'd rather have more of it.
And see, this is the problem with these kind of conversations. You fell into the trap, Kevin. You have fell into the trap. I've listened to you talk for 5 minutes and talk about Social Security. And now one time that you admit that for the last, 4-5 decades, Social Security has been paying out on time. People have retired off of Social Security, taking care of their families off of Social Security. Those checks have come in on time for
That's
decades.
not my point.
Decades
I'm not saying it doesn't work.
I know, but you left that out. You said everything negative, everything can go wrong.
No. I was simply making the point, Nathan.
I know, but I'm just making the point now that you didn't even mention the fact that Social Security has been paying out on time for decades. People have retired. People have taken care of their grandkids. They have paid mortgage payments, paid for all kinds of things. Not one time did you make that point, and then you went into the whole greed argument, feeding into people's greed. Yeah, sure, we all want to keep more of our money. We all do, but that ain't even the real culprit. The culprit is that your boss is probably robbing you blind on your job. Your wages have been pushed down. That's the real culprit. American workers have been extremely productive over the last 40, 50 years. The bosses have gotten rich, and then they're artificially keeping your wages down, telling you the problem is the IRS. That is not your problem.
That's not what I'm saying.
Your problem is that the ownership class has been preying upon your work and getting rich off of your work and paying you pennies. That's the real culprit. It ain't the IRS.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with you. And I wasn't saying that the IRS is the culprit. I mean, I think it's like what Phil said. Two things can be true at the same time. Everything that you said just now was absolutely 100% true. I agree with that. I agree. So if my boss wasn't depressing my wages and I was able to get more wages, I would still say I want to keep more of those wages than have them taxed and give to the government. So yes, stop depressing my wages and let me keep more of them. So I would agree with you. Two things can be true at the same time. You're right. Social Security has paid out on time. It's done everything that you've said that it's done. But my point with that is that for some people, they could get a better return on that same money than what they're getting through Social Security if they were to take that same money that they're paying in Social Security and invest it on their own. So I'm not disparaging what Social Security has been. What I'm saying is that for people who might want that option, there's a better way that you can take that same money that you're paying into Social Security, keep it, invest it yourself, just like you do in the 401k, and have a better monthly payout than you're going to get at Social Security. But the reason why they will not allow that to happen or give people an option to opt out is because if you did that, the whole system would collapse under itself, because what they're doing right now is those paychecks and things that you're saying that come out on time and that people are living off of, they're coming off of you and me labor right now. Right. And that's no fault on those people, because the people who retired before them, they were getting paid off of their labor. So when they say when they say that Social Security is kind of a Ponzi scheme, I think that's a negative for people who would say that, and it's not true. But it does operate on a system of our money that we're getting ain't the money that we're putting in right now. It's going to be somebody else who comes behind us who's going to be paying our checks. We're paying somebody else's check right now.
And then when demographically, when you have a larger when you start having fewer births and a large elderly population like the baby boomers, that kind of thing, that's when you're really at risk.
Yeah, no,
correct,
you're
Kevin?
right. Yeah.
You want to know how we got here in terms of Trump? It's greed. Peeling upon people's greed. So yeah, I hear what you're saying, but the system has been working for decades. And does it have that aspect to what you said? Like, hey, I'm paying for future Social Security recipients. Absolutely. And that's the way it's supposed to work.
No, you're paying for
current
for
or future.
ones.
Absolutely. That's the way it's supposed to work. The real problem with it.
No, it's not.
It is supposed to work that way. That's the way it's been working for decades.
No, it's supposed to be a trust fund, meaning the money stays in there instead of just being spent.
Yeah,
that's what's
and you may be right about that, Phil. But as I said earlier, the biggest problem with Social Security is that if you make every dollar you make over $176,000 is not taxed into it. It is completely unfair.
We all agree.
So if you make under $176,000, 100% of all of your income is taxed to Social Security. If you're a millionaire, several times over 100 millionaire, we're talking about 0.01%. It's wrong.
In fact, I'll take it a step further. I think, all the tax cuts that have been proposed that have been by Trump and George W. Bush and all of them, that's the reason they really are a tax cut much more for the wealthy than those who are low income. I actually think they should have a tax. If they really want to cut taxes, they should actually totally cut out that FICA for people up to 175 and then tax it of people over. To me, that would be a much fairer system.
From what I'm seeing,
I could get with that.
With the tax cuts that they're proposing, and I like what you guys are talking. I was going to say something, but I didn't want to get into this. The no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and that would completely energize a middle class. And then they're talking about anybody over $1 million will pay 40% tax to offset that. I mean, we're starting to act that if Trump passes that, because he's already got some of it passed through the House, if he gets all that stuff passed, is he still going to go down or he's still going to hate him if he goes and he attempts to fix this?
No. Let's be clear. The first Trump tax cut and this next tax cut, by the way, which will balloon the deficit far, far beyond whatever savings that Doge comes up with. Okay, it's going to continue to bankrupt the country. Okay, no matter what. But I'll be the first to say it significantly benefits the well-to-do for the reasons we've just talked about. As I said, if he, and here's an interesting point. They always say, a tax cut juices the economy. It juices the economy if the people who get the tax cut spend it. If you cut taxes for the lower and middle income people, guess what they're going to do with that? They're not going to put it in a bank. They're going to spend it. So therefore, a tax cut for people on the lower side does much more for the economy than giving multi-millionaires money. They're just going to throw and buy.
No tax on tips and the no tax on overtime. Those are two specific things that I'm talking about that would automatically energize the trade industry, the working industry. Those are two things that would. And I'm asking if those things pass in this new tax bill that's going to the Senate, will y'all give Donald Trump props for that, or will y'all still go down as a diabolical hater?
No. Look. There's no argument that no tax on tips and no tax on overtime overwhelmingly benefits working class people. But I think to Phil's point is that giving these huge tax cuts to the wealthy people who don't need them and quite frankly aren't even really asking for them, is not going to, and adds to our national debt, is not going to help the economy. We've seen this before when Trump did this before. All these guys did. They didn't create more jobs. They didn't let it trickle down to the workforce. What they did is they went and they did stock buybacks. They went and bought back all of this stock and everything that they stole.
Got
And they
richer.
made, and none of the trickle down that was promised by these tax cuts to the wealthy came to any type of fruition. Yet people always fall for this every single time, which I don't understand why working people are always standing up for rich folks who continue to rake them over the coals again. Like Nathan said, depressing wages, cutting jobs. It's like, you know, these people at the top, they're always looking ways to increase more money for them, even though they don't need it. And a middle class tax cut, as Phil said, goes way farther than a upper class tax cut goes, because those are the people who are going to be spending money. Rich folks ain't spending no money. They got everything. What are they buying? They own most of the stuff.
Well, they're not buying anything more because of the tax.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly. It's like they're not buying anything more than what they already get. They got everything. But
you know,
but people who have less, they're gonna spend that money.
Proof of what you're saying, Kevin, is, you know, look at the stimulating effects of these stimulus checks, right? What happened? People went out and they bought stuff, and they went to restaurants, and
Absolutely.
they patronized small businesses, and it impacted and lifted us during, you know, what we're doing with the pandemic. So absolutely. I mean, I've always laughed at this. I really have. The idea that somebody wealthy is waiting for a tax refund check to start a business is absolutely ridiculous. They're not sitting around like, man, if I just got that 20 G's and they're already got millions in the bank and they're waiting for another 20, 30, $100,000 to start a business. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. But, you know, listen, the right wing has been very successful in using their media platforms to fool the people. And
Because what they do is they
put a
sell
lot of energy
Look
into
at the
it.
estate taxes. The estate tax is a good example. The estate tax, in my view, was actually one of the fairest taxes because it taxed wealth. It didn't tax people's income. Nobody who had to pay an estate tax. It didn't result in people not working any harder. Okay, it was, and not to mention the fact the person whose money it was is dead, and yet it was frankly very fraudulently described as a death tax, as if the average person was paying it. The only people that ever paid that estate tax were very, very wealthy people, and that was just a total phony campaign against that, in my opinion.
They're all phony campaigns from the Republican Party, Phil. They're all phony campaigns. Every last one of them.
Not this Republican, pal.
That's all I got, guys. Here we are at the end of the show. I ask the same questions I always ask. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Was there something that was brought up you want to come back to, or just a thought that comes to you as we end the show?
Well, if we could indulge for maybe like 5 more minutes, I would really like to talk about, I know we had this on tap and we didn't get to it, but I did want to talk about what, again, it just goes more along the lines of Trump's bully tactics in terms of what he's trying to do with 60 Minutes and
okay. Yeah, let's get into it.
You know, with CBS and that sort of thing. And, you know, obviously it hit a core with me, you know, being somebody who works in the media. And I just think it's, you know, it's just more of, you know, sort of his ridiculousness. I mean, if you want to talk about something that flies in the face of the First Amendment, where it says the government shall not do anything to infringe upon the freedom of the press, this is a textbook example of violating the First Amendment here, where you got the president of the United States trying to encourage the FCC to penalize and take a license away from a news organization because he didn't like the reporting that they did against him and for his and did for his opponent. Not saying that they did it. I mean, this is his accusation. He's saying that, you know, media tried to make Kamala Harris look good while villainizing him, which is, you know,
and he's upset that they interviewed Zelensky on 60 Minutes. Like there's some violation for interviewing a foreign leader.
It's a frivolous lawsuit. He won't win it. But I think.
But the media started to settle it. You know, not to interrupt, but if you notice, CBS is, because they're owned by Paramount, and Paramount's trying to merge with, I think, Skydance. They're basically kind of saying, yeah, we'll settle because we don't want you to stop this merger. It's a scary thing. It is, as you guys would say, it's out of the autocrat playbook.
And that's what I say. You're right, Phil. It is unfortunate that for other business reasons, they're making a decision to settle these cases with Donald Trump. You know, again, it gets,
which hurts all of our first.
Could any of those reasons why they're settling for these cases with Donald Trump is because they are potentially liable? Is that could that it just can't be. Or hold on. Or like the AP has been wrong, and the AP has been proven wrong about how they attacked Donald Trump, and now that he's calling him out, and he's like, and what he's trying to do, in my opinion, is he's trying to like shoo fly, get away from me. You keep how they took Kamala Harris's interview and chopped it up and made it sound like she answered questions, and that's against.
But that's your first.
Okay, hold on. How they weaponized Fannie Pack Willis, how she's facing charges. How they used Letitia James, how she's facing. Come on, man. How they attacked Donald Trump.
I'm sorry. Who's they? Who's talking about the media?
How the Biden administration, how everybody used all those things to how to weaponize the media to attack Donald Trump. They put felonies on him. They got him a mugshot in Georgia that didn't stick. All this stuff, and y'all still have not.
The media didn't indict him. The government
and
indicted
nothing
him.
stick.
You have drunk the Donald Trump Kool-Aid, Tarris.
No, I'm saying y'all should move on. Nothing's sticking on this dude. He's like Teflon Don, and y'all still trying to. And then y'all are settling. Y'all like, the reason why he's settling must be this or that, not because they're liable.
No, they're not. Listen, Tarris, let me tell you, they're not liable. And I'll be glad to get Jack Greiner or any First Amendment attorney, you pick one, to come in. I've been in this business for almost 30.
They're settling because he's threatening their other businesses.
Exactly.
That's why they're settling.
I'm gonna
just like it's
George
exactly, by the way,
Stephanopoulos.
why Zuckerberg. It's why Zuckerberg gave $1 million plus for Trump's inauguration, because you know what Trump said? Trump said, I'm going to throw this guy in jail. That's what he said. Okay. And plus Meta has a bunch of mergers in government business. So the answer, with all due respect, is not that these guys had any liability concerns. It's just that Trump was threatening their overall business, just like he threatened Jeff Bezos to cut off their postal rates, to reduce or increase their postal rates, because he didn't like what the Washington Post.
Zuckerberg sat in front of Congress and sat there and told him that the Biden administration made him use Meta to manipulate stuff during the.
That's not what he said. That's not what he said.
Paraphrasing.
Come
on, y'all are talking about how the Biden administration used the media. So when he's like, this ain't shoe fly.
There's a difference between paraphrasing and misrepresenting. First of all, let me tell you, and like I said, I'm not a lawyer by any stretch of the imagination, but I've been doing this long enough, and I've dealt with enough lawyers, and I've dealt with enough people who have tried to come at me and papers I've worked for over the years on these defamation and libel cases, to know that the law that you know how they say in a criminal case that in order to find somebody guilty, it's got to be beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not quite that strong when it comes to defamation, but it's pretty daggone close. That you got to have a pretty sizable body of evidence to prove defamation.
It has to be knowingly reckless or false. If it
George
involves
Stephanopoulos, why they settle George Stephanopoulos?
Because
I'll tell you why they settled George, because they were scared of Trump, and Trump was threatening their overall business.
There was no liable to it at all. There was no truth to it. There was no truth to it at all. He did not misrepresent.
No, that is not why they said. That is not why they settled, Tarris. That's not why they settled, Tarris. I'm telling you right now that many times, that in many settlements, especially with media organizations, they'll make the calculation that sometimes it's not worth the fight, right? Like, it's easier to just go ahead and settle this than to have to deal with this guy again, threatening these other larger business interests that they're in, because a merger is going to be infinitely more money than this little $10-12 million or whatever Donald Trump is trying to get. And they'll swallow that to make $100 million or $1 billion or $2-3 billion on a deal. I'm not going to scoff at 10 million if I know I got $1 billion or 600 million or whatever it is coming down the road. I'll take that loss. And sometimes businesses make that calculation all the time. You see it with celebrities. Like, we automatically assume, like, if a celebrity settles with somebody who brings a lawsuit against them, oh, they must have did it. But sometimes attorneys will tell them all the time, hey, look, man, just go ahead, pay them off, get rid of it, move on.
Michael Jackson did something strange.
Yeah, like businesses, people make those decisions all the time. It is not necessarily an admission of guilt. You know, you ought to know your favorite program, Fox News, did that when they lied, when they actually did lie, and it was proven that they lied against Dominion.
Well, they settled because they were liable. And that's
but what did they include? But what did they include in that settlement, Phil? Right? No admission of guilt. Right? So one knew they were guilty, but in the settlement they said, you know what? No harm, no foul, nothing to fear.
But everybody understood. Everybody understood that they were dead wrong and lied completely, and that was a truly legitimate
legacy media. And I'll say this, and I'll leave it alone. Legacy media has been attempting to take Donald Trump out since 2016, and they have not. Their attempts have missed horribly. So when they stop and pivot to something else and let this man just go ahead and do his thing. And I'm not a Trump lover. I'm just like I said, legacy media has attacked Trump.
You don't even understand what Trump's psychology is. Trump vilifies the media, but he loves the media. He wants the media. He needs the media. If it wasn't for the media, the phenomenon that was Donald Trump probably wouldn't even exist, because the media, for so much when he first started running, they ignored other candidates in favor of Donald Trump. He got overwhelmingly, way more coverage than any other presidential candidate in the Republican primary when he ran. Why? Because Donald Trump was good television. Donald Trump was good internet clicks. He said crazy stuff that nobody had ever realized before. And by the time people recognized, like, oh crap, this guy might actually win, it was too late. He had already capitalized on all of that free media coverage and whatnot that he got. So you can say what you want about the media vilifying or being on the media actually propped Donald Trump up and helped him get elected in 2016. So I think it's somewhat disingenuous for Trump now. He vilifies the media now because it's to his advantage. He's been able to paint this fake news narrative because he wanted to create an environment where nobody could question what he said without having that tinge of, oh, this is a witch hunt, or they're just after me. And he's perpetrated that, not because it's true, but because it benefits him. And people like you who sit up here and regurgitate that crap are playing right in his hands. Donald Trump loves the media. Donald Trump, he lives by this philosophy. There's no such thing as bad news as long as you're talking about me. He's using the media right now to flood the marketplace with all of this crap and keep people talking about everything so they can't keep up with it. I'll give him credit in this regard. He has been a masterful user of media in his decade along in the spotlight, in the political spotlight. He's used it. He's played it like a fiddle to get what he needs to get out of it. And he gets it both ways. He gets the coverage, then he gets to turn around and vilify it in the same breath. And that's his playbook.
But the Democratic Party has done the same thing. The Democratic Party has done the exact same thing and used it when they have the DOJ. And like I've said it a couple of times, it's when the rabbit gets the gun, everything changes. So now that Donald Trump has it, I don't blame him for doing what I'll say it again. I'm not a huge Donald Trump fan. And this is the media thing. It's the media thing, and how Joe Biden and Kamala Harris used the media and how they attempted to use it one way. Donald Trump and Dana White attempted to use the media a certain other way, and Donald Trump's way worked. And I'm like, okay, cool. Y'all's way didn't work. Stop and just move on instead of keep trying to because you haven't won a lawsuit. You have not convicted him of anything that has stopped him from moving on into his agenda. All it is just, and the people who and not anybody is left relevant who has came after him. I just think, just leave him alone, let him go do his thing, and move on to something like.
Because that's not the role of the media, Tarris. The media's job is to hold those in power accountable, to ask tough questions, to make sure that they're not taking advantage of the people and abusing their power. And so, no, the media is not going to back up off of Donald Trump or any politician, because that's not what we do. Our role is to hold the powerful into account.
That's not fair, Kevin.
And that's what we do.
Because Donald Trump went into the black media, but then Kamala Harris got to duck and dodge, and that's why they got sued, is because they cut up her interview. You guys are, I know there's somebody saying false equivalent. It's like, it's not good for it. The Democrats cheated and they got caught, and like with manipulating interviews, Kamala Harris's interview that she got caught manipulating. I mean, I'm just saying, you guys use the media just as much as Donald Trump, but when Donald Trump uses the media and fights back about it,
let me just say this. Let me just say this. Tarris uses these words, and Nathan tried to make this point in the last podcast when I was talking about teachers and educators, and he was just saying, hey, I was trying to make some statements, and he made the statement, hey, don't disrespect the profession. That's not what you do. You don't know the ins and outs of everything that's involved. Have some respect for that. And I came back at the end of the pod and I was like, you know what? You're right. That wasn't what I was trying to do, but I feel that. I hear you on that. And Tarris, that's exactly what you're trying to do, because you're sitting here talking about manipulating and cutting up interviews. First of all, that very statement in and of itself is straight from Donald Trump's Twitter account. It's straight from Truth Social. And again, anybody who knows anything about how media goes through their job or does their job knows that every interview is not manipulated. It's edited. It's edited for time, space, clarity, factuality. So everything that is said in an interview ain't just dumped out on the internet in a 2-hour video or 2-hour interview with Kamala Harris. You're not getting 2 hours. So everything is going to be cut up, edited, and delivering the most, what you believe as a journalist is the most salient information that's going to impact the most people on the most relevant issues. You're not going to get everything. Now, Donald Trump will look at that and say, oh, they're just trying to make Kamala Harris look good. No, that's the journalistic process that happens in every case. You think Fox News doesn't do that when they interview Donald Trump, that they don't edit, that they don't cut up, that they don't present things? Now, you don't want to say that Fox News is manipulating Donald Trump's, which I can tell you they probably actually are. But I'm telling you, most other news media, mainstream news media, doesn't follow that. They operate by a set of standards that is called editing, that is called, preparing content that is relevant and speaks to the most important issues that people want to talk about. So Donald Trump is trying to take what is the standard editorial process and use the word manipulation. And that is an insult to everybody who goes out and does real journalism every day, who knows that that's not what is happening. But once again, it's par for the course for what Donald Trump does for his own purposes.
Tarris is having a good time. I'm looking at his face right now.
I think it's whenever it's a proven fact that they put out something that was supposed to be live footage.
It hasn't been proven.
Well, why did they pay? Why did they pay? Why did they pay?
CBS hasn't paid anything yet.
Okay. I would like to challenge that.
George Stephanopoulos, and we talked about this. I thought that George Stephanopoulos should have stood on business.
I'm talking about a different time. I'm talking about a different.
He didn't have a choice.
I'm talking about the Kamala Harris interview.
The company was scared of business reasons.
Correct.
George
Correct. And I read afterward that he was upset about that decision. So let's put it where
here's the other thing that I can say.
Company ABC. It was with them. But let me say this: about maybe a week and a half ago, there was a very interesting exchange between Margie Taylor Greene. She was like caught in a hallway, and there was a woman who was with the foreign press, not sure what country, could have been the UK, and she was asking her questions that she just didn't like. And at some point, she was like, "You know what? You're not an American journalist. I want to talk to an American journalist." And she turned to somebody else who was off camera, and she said, "Are you an American? Okay, he's an American. You go ahead and ask me a question." And that man, I don't know who he is, but I want to give him props. That man said, "Okay, well, I want you to answer her question." And I thought that
Yeah.
is what the media should be doing right now. You got to have each other's back. You cannot acquiesce. You cannot bend the knee. You have to stand up. If they try to ignore the Cincinnati.com, well, then WCPO has to step up. You have to protect one another, because if you do not, it's divide and conquer.
Yeah,
I
and
was
most do, Nathan.
But
and most
now they're
do.
controlling the Nathan, they're controlling the White House pool. So they're slipping in
yes.
these Newsmax and other, part of my language, ass kissers. And so that's why when Caitlin Collins asked that very legitimate question and Trump blew her off, he then turns to the
Yep.
guy from wherever it was, Newsmax or something. And, oh, we love you, Mr.
I
President.
was
think
slightly
what's-
upset to see that. And again, I can see the arguments of both sides, but I thought, so for folks who don't know, basically, and Tarris, for you as well, the reason why Donald Trump barred the Associated Press is not because they were, I don't know, unfairly reporting on him. It was simply because they would not refer to the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America. That's what this is all about. And so they stood on business and the facts, and Donald Trump basically removed them from the press pool. Now, within the last week, a federal judge says, no, this is wrong. You have to let them inside and give them access to the president. To this point, that has not happened. So it's yet another sort of constitutional crisis, Trump versus the courts, that's kind of looming in the future. But I thought to myself, what if all of the mainstream media press corps members say, you know what, if the Associated Press is not going to be here, none of us is going to cover you. But then on the other side of that, I thought, man, they've got these Newsmax wackos and these Fox News wackos. I mean, they would just dominate the entire, session. So that's the reason why they did it. But again, my point is, media has to stick together. You have to, if they don't answer your question, then the person behind you has to force them to answer your question. You got to have each other's backs.
Yeah, and in most cases they do, Nathan. I mean, in most cases the media does stick together, but you're right. I mean, in that instance, you can't very well do it, because if all of the other mainstream media were to withdraw, that's exactly what it plays into Donald Trump's hands, because now nobody is looking at what he's doing, or nobody is asking the tough questions. So you can't, in that situation, you can't go that far. But there are other ways, whether it's newspapers collectively writing editorials, doing sorts of things. There's ways that you can back up, your media partners without pulling out. I mean, I think I even recall an instance when here locally, when I can't remember, I think it might even been one of our reporters, might have been our sports reporter for the Bengals, had written something about Joe Mixon, and Joe Mixon didn't like what was written. And Joe Mixon decided that he wasn't going to do any more interviews with that particular reporter. All of the sports reporters kind of rallied around that one reporter and basically said, hey, if you're not going to talk, then if you're not going to allow her to talk, none of us are going to talk to you, and that sort of thing. So
I love it.
I think,
but my question is, would they have done that with Joe Burrow?
Probably not. No, I mean, I think probably not, because Joe Burrow, is
the quarterback.
A phenomenon in and of itself. I mean, there is something to be said for who you gonna protest, right? I mean, I think that is the reality, of a lot of things, not just that situation. There's some folks people will stand 10 toes down on, and others they'll tiptoe around.
You're picking and choosing, as they say.
Yeah.
You picking and choosing. So I give them props for that. That's the spirit of what I like. But yeah, you picking and choosing. Like, it's easy to mob up on Joe Mixon, but would you do that with Jamar Chase? Would you do that with T. Higgins or Joe Burrow, some of the stars that you really want to talk to? And you confirmed it, but my guess would be no, they won't take that stance with those people. So what difference does it really make, right? If you ain't gonna stand on business with any at all, do you really stand on business?
Right. Last thing I'll say, since Tarris is on George Stephanopoulos, here's what I'll tell you. And this has been my experience, Tarris, that if they really believed that George Stephanopoulos had did anything wrong and they had to settle behind his wrongful actions, he would no longer be on the air, or he would have been demoted. I don't know too many people who get their company sued for millions of dollars who wind up maintaining the station that they have with their employer if they were truly in the wrong. So I think the fact that George Stephanopoulos is still on the air doing what he's doing tells you everything that you need to know about what the station, the network actually felt like about how wrong he was.
Just to be
So
clear, I'm
again,
not talking about him. I'm not talking solely about.
well, but that was the example you kept using
But the
about
one that I came back to was
was
the Kamala Harris interview that they had, that they proposed that was a live interview that was found out to not be live.
I don't think they ever proposed it to be live.
That they said was going to be a live interview. But if they
60 Minutes is never live. They didn't say that.
However it was proposed, there was a lawsuit out there, and then there has been a settlement. Or I'll share it with you guys whenever. And for as informed as you guys are, it really makes me think that you guys are playing with my intelligence. Whenever you guys are like, "Oh no, that didn't happen." Oh, the 60-minute one. Oh no, that didn't happen. That didn't. Like
Tarris, you know what your problem is? You know what your problem is you want to take a lawsuit. Tarris, if I wanted to sue you today, I could get a lawyer and I could write up the lawsuit and I could make all kinds of crazy allegations for you in the lawsuit, and not nary single one of them things would have to be true. And until it's adjudicated by a judge in a court and the case is argued, you can make any allegations in a damn lawsuit. Okay. What matters is when you go to court or whatever, are you found guilty? Right?
Settle before court.
Well, hey, look, a settlement is neither an acquittal or a proof of guilt. It's a settlement, right?
That's fair.
So you can't draw any conclusions from a settlement.
Or you can draw conclusions in the court of opinion, of public opinion. Sure. That's what we do.
And we all know we all know about opinions. They like, a certain part of the body. Everybody got one, and most of the time they stink.
That's fair.
Well, I say they keep getting with greed.
Excuse me. I believe, according to my college roommate, it was excuses that fit into that joke.
They both work.
Both of
they
them.
both work. Bill. You can you can kind of mold that saying.
Who might have quibble?
Tailor it to whatever argument you need at the time.
All right, guys. Anything else? That's all I've got on my end.
No, nothing else. Nothing else, please.
Let's talk about Phil walking the dog in the middle of the podcast. I want to talk about that. This is my club.
Fire trucks going off.
I do not. Look, all right. If you guys are going to bring that up, Forrest, come here. I'll show them to you next time. Forrest, actually, my ex-wife, it's my kids on. My ex-wife takes care of them when she has to go on business to Columbus. Forrest stays with me, okay? And as many of you know who own dogs, you're kind of at the whim of the pet. Okay, so let's just leave it at that.
It's so interesting. Dina makes a good point. She's like, when somebody settles against Donald Trump, it's an admission that person is the worst person ever. They were dead guilty. But all the times that Trump has settled, it's like that's just an admission that he just wanted to let it go and move on with his life. Right? It's just the hypocrisy, man. The hypocrisy. But I'm not going to go on and on. I appreciate everybody. Phil's already out of here. Thank you so much.
No, I'm getting.
Oh, okay, cool.
For you to meet. Get over here.
Yeah, you're right on that point. And lawsuits is just one of the many tools that Trump has in his arsenal.
Yep.
That he deploys.
Now, are you? How could you turn? How could you not turn your? How could you turn your back on this wonderful dog here? Okay. Am I telling the truth?
Yeah, definitely cute dog, Phil.
Looks like a good dog.
Thank you.
Looks like a good boy.
Sexy Phil and cute dog. That could be quite the program right there. Sexy Phil and his cute dog. I think the ladies.
Balloon pop. A balloon pop.
Should have balloon pop.
You can insult me, but don't say anything about Forrest.
Thank you so much, everybody in the audience. Really appreciate you. We're planning to be back on Friday at 1 p.m. for more Hot Mic. To the crew today, thank you for your time. Have an excellent Tuesday, and we'll talk real soon.
See you guys.
Yep, take it easy, guys.